So there's different ways that the technology and AI will affect how different regions work. So it may not affect the entire city, but you don't necessarily have a population in a rural area that's going to benefit from that kind of technology anyway. But definitely smart agriculture would benefit a rural society, right?
I think what we believe in is that global trade, even the short to mid term, is not going to like stop in that sense or reduce, right? Global trade will always grow. I think we are not too worried about that. But yeah, in the short term, I think this may result in what we're calling an AI race. Also has like a positive aspect to it because governments are more incentivized, companies are more incentivized to invest in AI technology.
It's all on GitHub. Our nationality is GitHub and Discord, right? And that's, everything else is a distraction, and then we just build on that. Globalization is not going to get away, right? Globalization is driven by two factors, right? The cost of transmitting a byte from country to country, that's fallen to near zero, right? And it's also driven by the cost of shipping or transporting goods from country to country. Those are the laws of physics.
I think the biggest thing I've learned from having kids is teaching them to be practical and solve problems, right? And Elon Musk himself even has a school thing around this, basically trying to teach his own children and others that you need to be practical around solving problems. And problem solving is essentially practical education, learning to apply knowledge rather than actually just sitting there reading a textbook, right? So they can thrive in it.
And I think that's where, just in terms of talent, we completely changed our approach to really be recruiter driven. If agency is now the most important, how do you find these guys? 20 years ago, they wouldn't appear in any history book, right? If we can find those guys and build around them, I think that is where all this is heading.
I think similar lines like finding your passion and kind of relentlessly following it. So it may be like entrepreneurship, it may be something else, it may be pure technology. I think that's what, in a way, like when I look at myself, that's what's kind of worked for me.
Hi guys, welcome back to the CTO show hosted by Tech Vibe. We're in Singapore for an interesting and amazing panel discussion. Today we have a really diverse array of guests, starting with Daniel, who's founder of Menlo Research. Ishan, who is the ex-CTO of Funding Society, is a leading scale-up in Southeast Asia, and now who is the head of engineering of growth in AI at Airwallex, which is a leading global fintech company. And finally, Chris, who is the chief digital officer of Huawei International. So welcome to the show, guys, and really glad to have all of you guys here.
Cheers.
Yeah. So I guess maybe before I dive into the questions, I would love to maybe for you guys to just briefly introduce yourself and maybe a little bit more about what you guys do. Yeah. Maybe starting with Daniel.
Yeah, so Menlo Research, we're a small, 2-year-old startup, I think, based in Singapore right now. And what we do is we build the brain for robots, all the way from hardware, all the way to like model training. So I think we're probably very well known for Gen, I think, which is an open source consumer local AI app. But I think where we're really focused right now is really exploring multimodal AI and really just understanding how do we perceive the world around us and how do we make it actually possible to run it on current day hardware and all that.
It's great. Right. So I work in Airwallex, which is a leading global fintech, essentially building the infrastructure for SME finance and then also offering software on top of it. I'm working on the AI and growth aspects of the company. So effectively trying to reimagine what global finance would look like if it's AI first. And before this, I think last 15 years has been some sort of combination of data, AI, and finance. So this is kind of like a nice combination of all of the past work.
So at Huawei, we're trying to build a digital platform for the future. So effectively from everything around your infrastructure, public cloud, AI, handheld devices, and future technologies, essentially Huawei has everything to power even smart cities like Shenzhen. So a lot of these cities have been built on Huawei technology. And we really drive the future aspiration for a lot of allied governments and organizations like the finance industry, everything from data storage, protection, through the core infrastructure and the cloud services that power these kind of companies.
All right. Thank you so much for the intro, guys. I'm really glad all of you guys are here because I think all of you guys represent maybe different layers of this AI stack. And obviously there's a lot of hype and talk about AI in Western markets, also in China. But I'm just very curious from a very local perspective, like what have you guys been seeing about AI in the local or Singaporean or Southeast Asia context so far?
So maybe I can go first. I think to me, Southeast Asia, I think for this, you probably want to look at like individual countries in Southeast Asia. So like when you look at Philippines, definitely there's large outsourcing business,
Yeah.
which is getting upended with AI.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, there are companies which are taking advantage of it and essentially building like AI first outsourcing businesses, right? So if you have like a BPO, can you build like an AI first BPO? If you have like, for instance, this company called Athena, which is building like virtual assistants, right? So I think, and when you look at Vietnam, I think manufacturing is like a sort of a big opportunity, which could be like a lot more AI first or robotics first in that sense. When you look at Singapore, there's an opportunity to sort of be a neutral party between like the sort of China versus US AI race, and actually build a space for companies to operate out of here and be able to offer services and models to both countries and do this globally. So I think I would break it down into like individual countries within Southeast Asia and look at like opportunities that exist for AI across that kind of gamut. And I believe like there's companies which are doing that and looking at that individually for individual use cases and country specific use cases already.
And do you see that this is actually something that is increasingly growing? Are you optimistic about maybe on the application layer of the use of AI in these contexts in these countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's you see more and more companies and governments investing in this space. And I think if you look at like the different waves, right? I feel like Southeast Asia was not able to kind of catch on to the SaaS wave, and you don't see like major SaaS companies or not many at least that have been built out of Southeast Asia. So I think with AI, there is a net new opportunity. So definitely, I'm pretty hopeful on different companies as well as governments getting involved in building for Southeast Asia problems.
I think Chris would love your commentary about maybe Huawei's perspective. Like, do you guys see a lot of activity in Southeast Asia, and if so, like what are some of these implementations that you guys are doing right now?
So probably what we see most is organizations that are trying to now adopt AI for specific use cases, right? So in the past, you had people riding the bandwagon more around content generation, right? So also like summarize this document, chatbots, these kinds of things. There were very simplistic use cases where you plug in via API to like, OpenAI with ChatGPT, etc. Now it's moving to I have this specific business problem or a specific use case, maybe industry based or maybe specific to their business or government department. Yeah. So developing how they can actually address those with AI beyond just text generation. So like looking at the workflow, looking at how they can improve maybe what a senior engineer can do and distilling that down so that a junior engineer has access to that knowledge via the platform. These are the kind of things that organizations are trying to achieve.
And do you only see this kind of implementation or adoption on certain types of companies or enterprises, or maybe the conglomerates that have a lot of resources and money, or is it distributed across every single Southeast Asia country, across the entire stack?
It's distributed in different ways. So for example, if you're a large government entity, you would probably want to do all of your AI stuff in-house, right? You're not going to want to stick it in the cloud because of sensitivity. The other thing that will affect that is governance of the data, making sure that sensitive data is masked out, these kinds of things, so it doesn't end up in the responses. So it's on the government side. If you're talking about businesses specifically, then by region, you definitely have specific use cases for different regions, but ultimately they come down to industry or business specific problems. And people are trying to tailor the AI to address those problems.
Got it. Daniel, I love your perspective about maybe even the, kind of the chip supply chain, right? Like a lot of the CHIPS Act and a lot of this recent tariffs from the US is actually around semiconductors as well. And obviously you're working very closely with this layer of the stack and also on robotics. So we'd love to see what your observations are.
Well, I think, Menlo is 27 people across 10 countries. So, I think we have a little bit of a different view on this, where I think, at the government level, there's a lot of politics and, there's a lot of narratives and all that, right? But if you actually look at the physics of it, where all these comes out, for robotics, I think, and you really focus, I think, on the universities instead. Which are the ones that are constantly putting out top quality work, top quality research, right? And I think once you zoom in at that level, the world looks a lot different. It's really about smaller clusters of people, rather than which country you're from, right? So I think in this region, the Hong Kong universities, HKUST and the others are doing fantastic work. Shenzhen, the stuff coming out from Shenzhen, the robotics mechatronics side, is absolutely top notch, right? I don't think you'll be able to replicate that sort of precision manufacturing and manufacturing know-how, for a very, very long time, right? And I think for us, especially if you look at the model training, this is a bit more distributed. You've got a very good cluster of, and even the Southeast Asian, universities, it's very distributed. It doesn't matter which country you're from,
Yeah.
right? And I think maybe just one thing at a very broad level that, I think we try to take a very humanity aligned look to it, right? And, if you just look at 7 billion people on planet Earth, they're trying to figure out how to incrementally make progress as a society, right? And, there's different places of comparative advantage and specialization built up. I think Menlo Research view is really that, I think a lot of these politics will be temporary in the very long term.
Yeah.
And we just have to focus on, what makes humanity better.
I think speaking of, this concept of maybe more about the macro impact of AI, I think this is a very interesting paradigm shift, right? Because, some economists have argued that, yes, in the previous industrial revolution, people lost their jobs, but you can always reskill. But, what a lot of AI represents maybe now is this entire shift whereby a lot of even white collar jobs will actually just be almost replaced or eliminated, right? And the ability for a lot of workers, especially in emerging economies, to reskill to a point whereby they can contribute global value is a little bit more difficult. I'm not sure if you have a perspective on maybe how do the Southeast Asia countries, or how does this actually affect maybe this local geography? Yeah.
So we've actually seen the complete opposite happen, right? Nicole and I were at Stanford, and we moved back, and we started the company, in this few time zones, right? And I think what AI has enabled is actually returns to agency and intelligence, right? Where, even if someone doesn't speak English very well, he now has a 24/7 tutor for him,
Yeah.
right? And if you are a good engineer, like there is, 20 years ago when we graduated, right? There used to be this thing where Peter Thiel stood up there and said, every billion-dollar company we founded within 10 square miles of Stanford.
That's what most VCs think
I don't
these
think
days
that's
too.
true. I don't think that's true anymore, right?
Yeah.
And what you're seeing is that I think human intelligence is really distributed, and it's just the opportunity isn't. Right now, you have a 24/7 tutor who's able to teach you, and we've just seen order of magnitude outcomes happen, just by giving a Claude key to intelligent young man or woman who's like, 23 years old coming out from college. And yeah, I think that's how a tiny bootstrap research lab can hang it there. I think punch for punch with, some bigger labs. And I think you're seeing really a transfer of opportunities globally, where I think there's this graph which shows, over the last 30 years, manufacturing, the cost of a TV has dropped. But on the other hand, the cost of healthcare, the cost of education, right, real quality of life stuff has actually gone up in comparison to purchasing power, right? And I think the macro opportunity over the next 20 years that we see out of this will really be where knowledge work becomes a lot more affordable, and the net, surplus, I think, of humanity will be a lot better.
I guess, Ishan, do you agree with that point? I think one of your earlier comments, you mentioned like BPOs, for example, in the Philippines, right?
Yeah.
But, maybe even if, let's say, you have the opportunity maybe to learn about AI, or you could be an AI engineer hypothetically, there's this entire wave of maybe like, coding boot camps, right? But I'm not sure if everyone became a software engineer, right? So what's your perspective on what Daniel said?
No, I think I quite agree with Daniel. I think I see this as a tool of empowerment, which effectively like makes you do more high agency work.
Yeah.
And I think the example that I gave also is essentially that transition, right, where some of the low agency work is moving to more high agency work, and that you could argue that that probably means that people are going to lose their jobs, or it means that that particular like, for instance, in most cases, when you interact with customer service, you are kept on hold today for, I don't know, let's say like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly it's a resource constrained area. But like with this, knowledge work will get like cheaper to access, right? And more affordable. So I think the demand for some of these things will also explode. And people will be able to focus on like higher agency work and then deliver like actually more interesting outcomes for a particular use case, but also for like overall humanity as a whole.
Chris, I'm curious to get your opinion on this as well, because Huawei is quite a diversified kind of provider, right? Everything from smart cities to AI and chips and everything like that, right? And semiconductors, smartphones, everything. You guys do everything. When I look at individual cities, for example, as a microcosm of this metaphor, right? The way I think about it is, maybe if a city actually is very forward thinking, right? We're in Singapore right now, right? If government policy is able to actually predict what the future is, there's a lot of fundamental advantages that the people in that country may have, right? Compared to its neighbors. But, one thing that maybe some people may argue is that AI will give us a lot of leverage, right? And because the people who have that leverage, maybe they will able to pull so much far apart from the people who do not have that leverage.
Sure.
So maybe in some countries in Southeast Asia, if you don't have that maybe forward-thinking government, you may be at a fundamental disadvantage, right? And then it's just like, wow, can my citizens in that country, can they actually catch up when everyone else becomes so globally competitive? And at that point, maybe it's not about the number of people you have, it's about how much agency you have, right?
Sure.
So not sure if you have any thoughts or opinions about that.
So I'll take a step back in terms of two parts, because the question originates from where we were coming like in terms of AI replacing people's jobs.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we're getting to like AI making things more advanced, that you've got cities that are now disparately ahead of other cities. But in terms of replacing people's jobs, what we really see is that it's not actually replacing people's jobs, it's augmenting them, right? So you're getting this concept of a co-pilot come in. So for example, the Industrial Bank of China has a co-pilot that sits on the customer service officer's computer. And when a call center call comes in, they'll answer that call, and it uses NLP to translate the audio into text, understands the context of the questions that the customer is asking, and then provides prompts to the customer service representative so they can answer the queries of the user very quickly and efficiently, right? So it might be customer account information that prompts up, then some specific product information, and then they ask for the nearest branch, and it will prompt up the nearest branch. So all that is happening automatically with prompts just coming up on the desktop computer without them having to just please wait a moment, let me go through, get your account information, I'll come back to you, put you on hold. So that really affects the customer's experience. But it also means there's opportunities now for lesser skilled workers that could actually be put into these positions because they've got the tools available to help them, address queries without the maybe knowledge and information they previously didn't have in that industry, right?
So the jobs will evolve, basically.
Exactly. So it's giving people essentially a augmented reality experience, right? They're just adding on skills and tools rather than being disadvantaged by AI. The next part is then to the countries and disadvantages of, say, urban kind of villages versus cities. So again, use China as an example. There's a concepts of digital twins where they've basically modeled the entire city, and that entire city is then modeled in terms of, what will happen if we do this? What will happen to traffic flow? What will happen if there's a major event crisis? You can model all these kinds of things. They're done in airports. Even Changi Airport here in Singapore is doing this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you an ability to more or less predict the future and model around it, right? Definitely you can look at rural area elements and say, well, that may not affect them so much. But then rural is also being affected by, let's say, like smart agriculture. So there's different ways that the technology and AI will affect how, different regions work. So it may not affect the entire city, but you don't necessarily have a population of rural area that's going to benefit from that kind of technology anyway. But definitely smart agriculture would benefit a rural society, right?
That's great. I'm glad everyone is very optimistic about AI. Yeah, that's great. I'm also curious maybe to dive into kind of the geopolitical side of things, right? All of you guys I notice actually are quite international in some sense, because not only are you guys maybe between different countries, you guys are also working for companies, right, that have actually global stakeholders, right, across the entire supply chain of AI, chips, manufacturing, those kind of things. I guess, Daniel, for you, I think obviously NVIDIA GPUs is one of this hottest commoditized assets, right, that people have really tried to invest in. But obviously now the US is trying to restrict that global trade, right? And you guys are also, still dealing with parties in Taiwan and who are, you guys are making these for global companies as well. How do you think about maybe this, nationalization and, decreasing globalization? And do you think this will decrease? How does this affect the semiconductor supply chain? And how do you think about these kind of conflicts as well? Yeah.
Listen, I think, humanity has gone through phases of, you've gone through Southeast Asia, right? If you just look in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And when I was living in Berlin, we were living next to the Berlin Wall. right? Where every day I would make the trek to go buy from the grocery stall at Lidl.
Yeah.
And I'll walk over a plate that, a boy who was my age at the time, 27 years old, was shot dead. On the same walk that I take to go buy groceries, right? So, I think humanity has gone through stranger things. The stuff that is happening right now, it really, is it a precursor to what will happen, or is it, just little, letting off some steam that, was there before? I think we have to take the longer view to everything. Matrix multiplication, linear algebra, these are universal principles, right? And I think for us, we just are focused, where are we long term? And, for Menlo Research, we are very clear. We're 27 people actually working towards what we call the Kardashev scale, right? And it's basically on the principle that, we believe that Earth as a whole will become, if we can figure out how to master Earth, right? We'll be able to get there. And if you work backwards, it's going to be robots, it's going to be artificial intelligence and all that. It sounds science fiction, right? But, it took 50 years from when someone took off on, the Wright brothers built the plane to when, it went to the moon. So I think my own view is that it's going to move a lot faster than we think, right? And, there's going to be a lot of work to make sure that, a lot of this is distributed, that, human society doesn't collapse, right? And we'll do that, as a society and as a species, we're remarkably resilient, right? But that said, there are these interregnums that we have to go through, but we can't lose sight of the potential that this technology has, because by the end of our lifetimes, when we're old, like we're roughly around the same age, I don't know about you guys, right? But 80 years old is like 40 years away, right? And I think we're going to age very differently from our parents, right? And I think that's what we're working towards.
Well, I plan on living forever. I don't know about you guys, but I guess Ishan, what about you? I mean, obviously there's a lot of these, things in the news, right? Do you guys feel there's temporary distractions? Is there something to anchor you to the future, like what Daniel said? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's different views you can take of it. So of course, there's like a future view where you anchor to the future, and I completely agree with Daniel that there's also a present that you're dealing with as a global business headquartered in Singapore. We sell to like pretty much a large part of the globe. And we are involved in payments. So there's aspects that maybe affect you temporarily. I think what we believe in is that global trade over even the short to mid term is not going to like stop in that sense or reduce, right? Global trade will always grow. So I think we are not too worried about that. But yeah, in the short term, I think this may result in what we're calling an AI race, which also has like a positive aspect to it because governments are more incentivized, companies are more incentivized to invest in AI technology, like what happened with the space race. So I think net, it seems like it's going in the right direction with some short-term blips. And even the trade war, I think it's evolving on like a week-on-week basis. Right? Like, I mean, with last night, there was some news that the tariffs have gone down or at least temporarily paused.
90 days, right?
90 days, exactly. So I think it's an evolving thing, and you just have to understand what's going on and then just respond accordingly.
On your comment, do you think it's more like the space race or more like the nuclear race?
I'm an optimist, so I think it's more like a space race. I think if you talk to a pessimist, they may view it differently.
Got it. And Chris, I think, obviously Huawei is kind of on that forefront, right? Sure. Yeah, any thoughts or any...
So I think we need to look at more practically. You have to step back in time, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at trade routes, they've always changed over time. Through history, if you were to map them out, you would see that trade routes have changed from the Dutch to the English to the Japanese, right, to US. So we've gone through all these different things, but it's not, our generation hasn't seen it, right? Because it happened over such a long period of time. So now we're actually living through that change in trade route, right? So that's where we're seeing these things. But I mean, take Huawei, for instance, around 5G, right? It was a big uproar with the US around security and all kind of reasons to try and suppress that technology. Ultimately, was it life-changing technology? No, it wasn't. So they made this big uproar, this big media spiel around how it was a life-changing technology and trying to suppress China. But ultimately, what did it lead to? Just, larger bandwidths, right? So ultimately, they're trying to stranglehold the tech hemorrhage, as in US control. And it happens both on a capital level of funding for startups and everything else, as well as academia, as well as then the actual technology itself. And now we're seeing the breaking or fracturing of that hemorrhage.
Got it.
This episode is brought to you by TechVibe. your one-stop IT recruitment solution provider. We connect global companies with top tech talent across Southeast Asia. Whether you're looking for permanent hires, short-term contractors, or employer of record, EOR services, we've got you covered, especially in the IT and digital sectors. Thanks for tuning in. And now, enjoy the episode.
So I'm curious, guys. One of the, I would say, bottlenecks or one of the enablers, right, of successfully deploying AI in a certain region or country or even a company is the fundamental talent, right? And I think right now a lot of people in San Francisco are going back to the office or going back to the city despite the other bad things about San Francisco. But how is it like in Southeast Asia or Singapore or wherever you guys operate? Like what's the talent density here like, and is that good enough for this AI ecosystem?
So you have a lot of diversity in talent, different skill sets, different skill levels. So probably you'll see a better uptick in Southeast Asia because of now coding tools that are available, right? So you may not have a depth of talent. A lot of people maybe only a front engineer or software backend engineer. In some cases, they kind of moonlight as both, and then when it comes to interview, you find out that they're either one or the other. But now with the GitHub coding tools and the things that build into VS Code, you have an ability to again augment the concept of what somebody knows with additional knowledge. So they may not have been the best coder, but they have enough direction to actually now produce good code with these tools. The next part would be judging people not just based on their university education or background or education. I want to know what open source projects have you contributed to, what your experience has been, and how you practically contributed to a project, not just a whole bunch of this stuff, this is my achievements. I want to actually see it and I want to know your project knowledge.
Yeah, I would say that talent density here is definitely lower than what exists in SF, especially around AI talent.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think there's also fewer opportunities where I would say very few companies in Southeast Asia are taking bold bets on AI and technology. So in a way, what we see at Airwallex is that also becomes our advantage, where we are willing to take bold bets and are actually doing a lot of interesting sort of technology work, which also attracts the right talent. So I think there is, perhaps the density is not very high, but there's definitely pockets of talent within Southeast Asia that you can find. And I think the other thing is Singapore is a great place to move. So we tend to move talent globally to Singapore, while we're also building teams in SF or London and other places. But Singapore is always a place that people want to move to. So so access to global talent as well as access to the best local talent is what we look at.
Great. I hope EDB hears this and sponsors our show for the next episode. But continue, Daniel.
I think I should say something controversial. Yeah. I think that talent is sucked for cultural reasons and education system reasons.
I love it.
Right? It's
why.
not, the raw intelligence is there, right? The people are smart and all that, but if you want to do, AI has made it such that two things are the most important: agency and the ability to think independently, right? Too much of our education systems and all of what we're doing, you can see a lot of it as factory lines, right? Singapore's education system is to create bureaucrats who run Singapore, right? As a scholar, right? That's what the education system is for. Right? And attract MNCs to set up here so that, we run Singapore well. You look at a lot of the other countries, it's still very factory mindsets.
Yes.
Right? And for Menlo, the major thing that I do during interviews is that I trigger arguments with people. I want to see whether they can argue, whether they can defend their ideas, right? And whether they have a spine, right? Whether they have some belief about the world, some painting that they want to paint by themselves, right? And invariably what you end up with is a whole bunch of outliers, right? And if I can just find 40, and we're not focused in Southeast Asia, we've got guys out of Turkey, they came from Tesla, all these things. We've got a bunch of guys who didn't get H1Bs and are now with us, but I think, can we think, right? Can we disagree? Can we figure out, if you know the answer, if you know your boss is wrong, tell him he's wrong, right? And then can you actually stand up in this combat of ideas and with strong opinions, and can you learn to fight? Can you learn to disagree, right? Because as much as I said the world didn't change, it did change in some ways, right? And how do you now build a culture around high agency people, right, who might not all agree but can still come together and build something, right? That's really hard to do.
I love that. I think actually even some, hedge funds and financial services, part of their interview, like for example, for Bridgewater, I've been told that their interview process is just tell me about the pharmaceutical industry. Why do you think it's bad, right? And then you just nothing about financial services because they believe that these are core skills that people can actually learn. But it's more around if you have the tools and if you have the leverage, right? Are you able to formulate the fundamental beliefs and the convictions, right, that take you to a certain place? I'm curious for you, Ishan, like now when you hire, now that there's so many AI tools, now there's Cursor, there's Windsurf, all of these new ones, are there certain things that now you look for that, maybe you didn't before, or now certain skills that now you think are way more important than before as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think we are effectively actually also looking at adding at an org level, like adding aspects of testing for like AI nativeness. And it's not a very sort of easy thing to kind of test for. It's just, I think to me, it's like fundamentally, are you curious enough that, there is this thing going on in the world for about 2 years or like more than 2 years. Have you sort of, given it enough of your time and, enough of your curiosity to figure out how this can make you better in whatever you do? Like that's the core thing to like really figure out. And if someone hasn't bothered about it because they haven't gotten time or whatever, then to me, it's like you just lack the curiosity to even bother about some of the biggest thing that's happened in a while and can potentially fundamentally impact your day-to-day job and work, right? So I think kind of comes down to like that base level curiosity. But yeah, also like more specifically how they've expressed that curiosity in the sort of tooling in the world of AI.
I see. And how does that manifest usually? Is it like in projects? Is it like my profile picture looks like Ghibli? like how do you guys usually test for these kind of skills?
Yeah, so I think there's different levels, of course. Like, people would have created a Ghibli image and then that's one level of curiosity. You may have found like the right sort of tools, like you may have configured ChatGPT a certain way to like deal with a certain workflow that you deal with on a day-to-day basis at work or outside. It could be, for instance, in one of the conversations, someone had actually created a workflow around parenting where they would actually record, the tuition classes that their kid was going and then kind of be able to review what were the gap areas and then work with them offline.
Yeah.
So I think it can express in different ways. But to me, it's like it's very fundamental that you've actually spent some time with this technology and try to figure out, hey, how I can be better in my day-to-day basis using this technology. So I think that's because if you do that, you will do that at work as well. Right? You will bring that curiosity to us like Airwallex as a company, and then you would also implement that here. So that's the mindset essentially that we're looking for.
If I backtrack this conversation to the concept around talent, right?
Yeah.
And you very explicitly mentioned why the talent has a problem, right? It comes back to history again. What was the schooling system set up for currently today? Industrial revolution. Produce good factory workers.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's not where we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess for you guys, for Huawei, because, it's a Chinese company and I also don't think you're Chinese, right?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. It's hard to assume.
I speak a little, but that's it.
That's amazing. Yeah. Like, I'm also just curious because it seems like Huawei, traditionally it started as a Chinese company. Now, obviously you guys are pretty global and you're not Chinese, right? Sure. They hired you and they view that international approach as important to talent development, right?
Yes.
So how do you guys actually think about maybe hiring talent, especially in this age of AI?
Sure. Yeah. So being a Chinese company, there's fundamentals of it which language barrier can desperately affect that you wouldn't have in a standard international organization. Standard organization would hire, like say in Korea, they would hire only English-speaking talent because they have to then converse with the US and those kinds of things. In Huawei's case, ironically, there's a lot of AI tooling being built into our workflows, right? So everything in terms of our instant chat messaging, our email, everything has translation built in. Even all meetings have real-time translation built in and fantastically translates between, Chinese, English, Bahasa, Indonesia, or what have you. Right. So we have that internationalization happening from an AI perspective that makes us a very global company in terms of communication. So we overcome that hurdle very easily. In terms of the other thing that we do is there's a lot of expats coming out of China that bring their knowledge base, especially from R&D. We send out R&D engineers into the field so that they get local information and local understanding of the problems and challenges that our customers face. So that you've got that real kind of absorption of information and challenges and bring it back to the HQ in order to ideate and create better solutions for the different region. So being an international organization, in the same way you have Korean organizations or Japanese organizations typically deploy a lot of staff out, we would do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm curious for you guys because you guys always all work with talent that's quite global, right? But I think AI is becoming, and chips, for example, are becoming more and more sensitive, maybe internationally. And even some companies in the U.S. they don't even allow you to work in these companies unless you're a U.S. citizen or green card holder. What do you guys think is the future of talent? Is it going to be more distributed? Is it going to be more global, or is it going to be continuously to be more even nationalized?
Yeah.
I think there might be some short-term, migrations or some short-term localization, but over the long term, I don't see that talent getting too fragmented. And I think it's also a balance between like closed source and open source, right?
Yeah.
So with a healthy open source movement around AI, I think most folks have access to whatever knowledge exists out there, and they are able to build and recreate or build like even better systems. Like for instance, DeepSeek's case, right? They managed to like figure out how to build like a novel, or create novel approaches to solving the same problem. So
Yeah.
I think in the mid to long term, it probably wouldn't matter.
Got it.
Ironically, I say it the other way. I say DeepSeek is a big illustration of the fragmentation, right? So you have now this split between East-West, and effectively you will have talent that is aligned to the East side, you have talent that's aligned to the West side. You might have a guy that's very good on VMware, he's worked in finance for a very long time, now he's transitioned to working with, for example, Huawei's virtualization product, and that's now his talent base. So he will appeal to all of the Southeast Asian banks that are using that kind of technology. He may not appeal to the international base of banks from the US and that sort of thing. So you will have this kind of fragmentation of talent and technology happening in the industry.
Interesting. I'm curious about you, Daniel. Like, obviously, you were in Silicon Valley before, and now you're doing not at just at the application layer, right? You guys are doing some very fundamental research, right, in AI and chips and those kind of things. Do you think talent will be continuously to be more condensed and dense in certain locations, or?
I think, we exist because people are kind of fed up with this, East-West divide.
Yeah.
We're very, very clearly a humanity-aligned AI company. My guys come from different countries. And the main sell is that, look, we're just going to build it. It's all on GitHub. Our nationality is GitHub and Discord, right? And that's, everything else is a distraction, and then we just build on that. And, I think that's really it. I think, look, globalization is not going to get away, right? Globalization is driven by two factors, right? The cost of transmitting a byte from country to country. That's fallen to near zero, right? And it's also driven by the cost of shipping or transporting goods from country to country. Those are the laws of physics, right? And China closed itself off, for 100 years, from 1800s to 1900s. It opens, right? Because the cost of shipping dropped,
Yeah.
right? So you will have, different things closing up, opening up, and all that, but you can't change the fact that it's become easier for 100 years ago. I don't even think that, all of us, come from different countries and backgrounds and all that. I don't think that we'd have been talking like 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But yet here we are. And a bunch of people are going to watch this on, YouTube.
All over the world, anywhere.
Yeah, and I don't think you can put that back in, and that's what we have to do.
And I guess just to play devil's advocate, though, maybe, there's a theme of being in maybe hubs, right? Where if you really want to increase what they call the surface area of your luck, right? And run into serendipitous encounters, right? Maybe with another AI engineer, maybe with another VC investor, maybe to build whatever the next foundation model. Maybe there's certain places where the talent density is very, very high, right? And as maybe technology or as certain even financial services in Wall Street in New York, as those things scale, maybe more and more people want to move to those hubs, right? As opposed to being remote, right? So do you think that as like just, as a kind of a black hole in terms of pulling all the talent in certain hubs, do you think that will actually play against what you said about being more distributed?
I'm happy to bet against that, right? Like, because I think as a small startup, you have to be contrarian in some way, right? And we've picked up guys from Tesla who just don't want to live in the Bay Area. And, and my hub is, so when we started this company, we just had a baby. So we were just working from our dining table.
Yeah.
We threw it up online and said, like, look, we're in Singapore, we're very far from the valley, but we're going to create this Discord.
Right.
And this Discord is our hub. It is our office, this thing that you're sitting in is It's actually just for me and my co-founder, right? Because we ran out of space, right? And it's, if you look at Discord, it's been wildly successful. There's like 13,000 people there. We've had people, almost everybody that we've hired from the team wandered through Discord and attended a meetup through Discord, right? So I think, even 10 years ago, that was not possible, right? And I think the world is changing, and it's changing. The days are long, but the decades are short. Where we're going to be in 2060 is going to be quite far away. That's it, right? Hubs will still be there. Cities have always been there,
Yeah.
And what we have is this, you're going to have this like sort of back and forth. And as a small startup, we've got to be contrary.
Yeah.
I cannot win in Shenzhen. I cannot win in Silicon Valley, but I can win if you have to take care of your bum, in some, city in Turkey. I'm quite happy to play the chances.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Balaji has this concept of like a network state and a network school, which I think he's trying to lean into, helping identify this like dark talent. So maybe that's something kind of what you're talking about as well, right?
And I think that's where, just in terms of talent, we completely changed our approach to really be recruiter driven.
Yeah.
Because so much of our time is just spent, and I would say recruiters are going to be like, if agency is now the most important
Yeah.
asset that a person has, right? How do you find that person, right? And my off camera, but at Tech Vibes, right? When I first met you 4 years ago, you're a recruiter. Now you have a recruiting agency and and you've started this podcast, right? That's agency, and there's this certain relentlessness about the people. And I would argue the outliers that you find in, this Southeast Asian podcast, but the outliers that you find, right? And we've just built the company of these guys, where the school system didn't accept them, but they'd already done research at the frontier at 17 years old. How do you find these guys? 20 years ago, they would be they wouldn't appear in any history book, right? If we can find those guys and build around them, I think that is where all this is heading.
So the opportunity is for Tech Vibe to go out and build that platform.
Maybe. How about you, Ishan? Do you believe that working remotely is a suitable kind of future for tech, or do you think a lot of these companies like Apple, Google, everyone is back to office now, right? What do you think about that when you manage your team as well?
I think it'll probably be both will coexist is my sense. I think some folks, you build a culture around what you believe in, right? So if you believe in everyone back to office and high bandwidth conversations, there is definitely pros to that.
Yeah.
But then it does limit access to certain kinds of talent who may be very talented but may not be able to subscribe to that particular sort of everyone in office or live in a city because they need to take care of someone or be in a certain place. Having said that, so I think both sides have pros and cons.
Yeah.
There's also advantages of living in a hub like we talked about, but I think sometimes hubs can also be a bit of an echo chamber and a bit of a bubble in that sense.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that balance also, sort of being in Singapore and then traveling to SF, drinking the Kool-Aid for a while, coming back, be able to have perspective on what's happening rather than from my, if you're in SF, you're driving to work, all you see is AI billboards, right? So I think that can perhaps be sometimes a little bit overwhelming as well. So that's how I think about it.
Fascinating. Chris, I want to maybe zoom out and take what you guys said, right? And I want you to hypothesize about what does the future of work look like, right? Are we going to still even have jobs? Are we still going to even come to offices? Or maybe, if someone is actually truly, an agency, right? A true agency model doesn't necessarily mean that I'm tied with one client, right? I could be working with multiple clients. I have many projects going on, right? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts or hypotheses about what that looks like? Yeah.
Your biggest problem today is that there's a generational conflict between perspectives on this, right? Older generation believes that, everyone should be in the office. That's the traditional way. That's how they grew up and that's what they've seen.
Yeah.
COVID taught us all something different, though. We realized that a lot of people that were flying around here and there were maybe not even necessary experts because they were just a overlay to the local team, and the local team was more than capable. Or in some cases, it may be that, again, agency, people could deal with people all across the world from a central location, and they didn't need to have this concept of being in every location they wanted. So It's been proved. COVID proved it. But what it did also prove is that we need that human connection. And that's the biggest thing people miss from conferences and meeting new people, that sort of thing. That disappeared in COVID, right?
Yeah.
You could randomly connect on LinkedIn or something, but you'll be hit and miss.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, do you think that human connection is something that we still need? And how do you actually balance that in a maybe remote culture where you do have employees, let's say, all over the globe?
They enjoy visiting each other. They enjoy visiting each other, and I think just last week we actually have our team here meeting in a cafe nearby. So we just I think how we've done it is really that we organize around conferences. So every time that they get together, there's small pods, 5-6 people, one pizza. You basically meet up when you present a product, right? And it's actually really fun. So the ICLR, you want to present a paper, you work like crazy on it as a remote team, you fly together, present it. It's been good. Yeah. So
Great. Very helpful. Daniel, I'm, like one of the things that I started to think about is, I want to have kids, one day. And I know you also have a kid. And I think right now, when I do talk to a lot of parents, like they're kind of confused, right? Because AI is disrupting a lot of these traditional careers. Should your kid be an accountant? I don't know, right? Should your kid be a software engineer? Maybe that job will also change as well, right? So I guess if you guys had to give some advice, maybe to younger engineers or people starting their career, or even if you're raising a kid and you're trying to teach your kid about the sense of what meaning is in life, right, or what purpose is, or those kind of things, what would you say?
I don't know whether I'm qualified to answer that. I got a 2-year-old.
I have 4 kids.
You have 4 kids. Okay, why don't you start?
So I think the biggest thing I've learned from having kids is teaching them to be practical and solve problems, right? And Elon Musk himself even has a school, I think, around this, basically trying to teach his own children and others that you need to be practical around solving problems. And problem solving is essentially education, right? It's practical education, learning to apply knowledge rather than actually just sitting there reading a textbook, right? So they can thrive in it. You'll see where they thrive, and you can encourage them to thrive more in that area. So things like software development, coding, very fundamental in the essence of like, this is a problem and I'm going to create a solution to it. Or even maybe you have a conceptual idea and actually making that a reality. And that's something you can do through coding. So coding, art history, these kind of things are practical things that will always be applicable, right? Even when you look through the ages, arts have always been something that can be applied. Engineering can be applied. Whereas, accounting method, it does have a core benefit, but maybe it's replaceable by AI because of automation and things. So ultimately, to take it back, problem solving is the key element that I would try and instill in my children.
And what happens if maybe you send your kid in the traditional education system,
Sure.
but maybe not everyone is as willing, to move away from a traditional education system?
Yeah.
What do? Do you kick your kids out of school and teach it by yourself, or do you
So-
get an AI tutor?
There's definitely different schools of thought on it, right?
Yeah.
It really depends on the socioeconomic status of the people as well, right?
I see.
You can't always have that choice.
Yeah.
In Australia, there's people, for example, who have taken a camper van and gone for a year or two and just done homeschooling and gone around the country and said the best thing ever, life changing, got out of the rat race, right? But then by the same token, you have people that go to international schools, they'll go to the Ivy Leagues later, that kind of thing. So it really depends on your social upbringing typically as to where you'll go. But ultimately, if you can come back to this tenet of instilling problem solving in your children, it won't really matter what school they go to. They're core skills that will be there for life.
So it goes back to Deng Xiaoping's advice, which is get rich first, basically,
Yes.
right?
Maybe contrarian thing. I don't think anything's going to change much for kids. I don't think so. And fundamentally, if you look at this era of AI, right, and we've seen this from, we as humans tend to hype up things, right? And we try to, yes, it does impact a lot of things and it does make it more efficient, right? But, if we were to rank all of this in the list of things that humanity has had, like fire, the wheel, and all that, right? I think this all started more of computers, and it's just a continuation of these tools. And I think, especially if you're making decisions, you've got to focus on what's not changing. And if you were to sit down and write down for your kid like what has changed and what hasn't changed, I'd say a lot of things just more on the what hasn't changed column. Agency, initiative, ethics, integrity. I mean that's all still there, right? And even though the little robot over here, I can tell you these things are a long way off further than we think. Yes, the days are long, but the decades are short, right? And it's going to come, but human society is going to adapt, and I think very little is changing, right? And I see a lot of very reactionary, very the more hype you are, the more like, very exaggerated you are in your responses to it. But the reality is that, ChatGPT has been going on. We're still sitting here talking to each other.
Yes.
You know,
Actually, I'm a high production model of a robot. They just added the flesh. That's why.
I'm going to put you into this someday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, I think maybe Ishan, I would love your comments on this. For example, I think a few months ago, Palantir, the US company, they launched this program for high school students. And they actually offer these high school students, hey, don't go to college at all, right? Just start working out of high school and we'll give you $270,000. Ironically, they still require you to take the SATs and ACTs. That's kind of funny. But actually some high school students, and I saw some of these kids, they deferred Stanford, they deferred Harvard, MIT. They're actually taking this program, right? And maybe software engineering is the first realm that this is going to happen. And maybe it's shifting back to more to a apprenticeship model. But when you think about this, right, or when you think about, let's say, if you were to give advice to young engineers on your team, like how would you think about, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, sure. There's many things there. I think one, like Peter Thiel has been doing it for a long time, right?
The Thiel Fellowship.
Yeah, he's had this Thiel Fellowship to like drop out of college or don't go to college and like just go out and build companies, right? I think it goes down to like really the fundamentals. One is like the sort of human fundamentals, right? Like whether, like you have agency, whether you have, curiosity to learn, whether you have, a certain level of IQ. And then second, it goes down to like fundamentals of like education in that sense, right? Like basic level of math, your understanding, your mental models of the world through physics, biology, computer science. I feel like that is important to be able to like build mental models about the world.
Yeah.
But then everything on top of that is just different layers of abstraction, right? So when you look at a computer, you can start at like a chip level, you can start at like a gates level, or you can look at the operating system, you can look at the computer, architecture, you can look at a language, like a programming language. And like over time, there's so many layers of abstraction. Like most engineers are just dealing with higher levels of abstraction.
Right.
And maybe like, with AI, that level of abstraction becomes like English or maybe something else in the future, right? But I think if you have the core understanding of, like the basic building blocks of the world around us, whether that's the physical world or the virtual world, I feel like you should be able to figure out any abstraction on top. So I think for anyone in like, sort of that age, I would say it's still important to understand these building blocks. And then you should be more prepared for whatever is coming. But if you're looking at like way back, like, someone who's a kid, like I have a 7-month-old. And when I think about like, if I'm to go back in time when I was 7-month-old and tell my parents what I would be doing today.
What would you say?
They would be like laughing at my face, right? They was like, what are you even talking about? They would have been very, very happy at that point of time if I'd gotten like a government job in India, doing some paperwork, right? That would have been like the zenith of what you can imagine as success. So I think when I think about the same thing for my own kid, I think it's very hard to project into the future and know how he or she will be successful. But I think it's the building blocks is what we can provide as parents, is my own personal point of view.
Yeah, I love that framing. Oh,
Do you have a 7-month-old?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. No, I think it's actually been really, really interesting. Like, we had a kid, we started Mendel, and we trained a model and raised a kid at the same time and raised 2 cats.
Yeah.
Right? And you I don't know, like, I just feel like today's model architectures aren't really the end point because they all learn so differently, right? For the first 6 months, the 2 cats were like the clear winner.
Right.
Then Ouroboros caught up, then Vicuna, and then, the 2-year-olds now like accelerating past everything.
So my wife is an AI engineer as well, and
Yeah.
this is a common point of discussion at home, comparing our baby with AI models.
Yeah. No, you can join a club. There's a whole group of us in like a WhatsApp group being like, I don't think LLMs are the future.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I love what you said though. Like one of the people I really respect is Charlie Munger, right? And he always advocates for, having these mental models, right? Because the fundamental thesis is that human behavior changes very, very slowly, right? compared to 2,000 years ago. Even, Marcus Aurelius wrote about the same struggles that we also face today. And even in this, fast-changing world of AI, maybe these fundamental building blocks are still going to be there, right? Last section is I want to end with some medium rapid-fire questions, basically. Not so fast, but some random questions that I have. The first question is, I want to be as successful as you guys someday, and very wealthy, right? If you could maybe only invest in 2 or 3 assets, it could be equities, it could be stocks, it could be yourself, it could be anything that will compound the fastest in the next 20 or 30 years in this age of AI, what would you invest in? Who wants to go first?
I'd say entrepreneurially speaking, yourself. So your own business, your own kind of startups.
Okay.
Fail fast, learn from them.
I also invest in YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah.
Secondly, probably as a father, your children, right? Because they're the future. So whatever you're building and investing should be for their future, right? And of course, then you have your Bitcoin and your stocks and everything else. You can use your trading apps and these kind of things, make some quick cash.
Okay.
I think on my side, I mean, of course, like first your own learning.
Yeah.
And I think 2 other important aspects. I mean, I won't talk about the financial aspect because I think that I don't think I'm the best person to like figure out what financial assets to invest in.
Yeah.
But I think health and environment are probably 2 long-term things that like, I think about a lot. And as I'm getting older and, with the kid, I definitely think about like health a lot and how I can sort of take the right steps, build the right thinking about health, at least in my family first.
Yeah.
And then like, kind of hopefully influence a larger circle around it. And then environment, and we've talked about Southeast Asia, AI, like Southeast Asia is the hub of biodiversity for a large part of biodiversity for the world.
Yeah.
We have, some of the, like some amazing rainforests, mangroves out here. And I think also thinking and investing in that in some way is what I sort of actively do.
They say health has no value until you lose your health.
Yeah.
So,
The healthy man wants 10,000 things. The unhealthy man only wants one thing.
yes, exactly.
Not my quote by Naval, but yeah.
I mean, I am not a good investor. I just buy GPUs, and I think it's more interesting probably think about it from a societal point of view, what we should really invest in. I think one thing that's maybe on my mind a lot because we've seen some examples of it not go very well the last few days. I think as a society actually investing in like the rule of law is actually really important because without that, your high agency people, you tend not to have like an equal opportunity for everyone.
Yeah.
And then your high agency people, even if you give them AI, they can't sort of like break through. And if you look at, I think the US for the last, 100 years, that's really been the thing that has allowed it to flourish.
Yeah.
And across, even the cities or countries that we work in, you can see the environments where a high agency person, you don't need to worry about him, right? He'll find his way if he goes to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in some countries, like, does he know the right people?
Right.
Yeah. And so I think that's I think something.
Yeah, I think we're very lucky to be in Singapore where maybe that's one of the best manifestations of the rule of law because, obviously from, the 1950s until where Singapore is now, the compound growth and the trajectory of Singapore is quite impressive, right? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Next question. AI girlfriends, are they going to happen or not?
I think they're kind of already there with ChatGPT. You can ask it to be your girlfriend, and it can ask you how it is. And there's a few other apps out there, right? So they can almost, do that with virtual avatar and everything else.
I guess maybe the question is not necessarily, just chatting with it. Do you think that people will almost replace this human relationship element of what a girlfriend actually is with, AI tools, let's say?
Maybe to some degree. Take Japan, for instance.
Yes.
Huge problem around, people being single, right? So there's a massive loneliness epidemic. And as a result, of course, technology will step in.
What do you think, Ishan?
Yeah, I think, very similar. Like there is definitely like a loneliness epidemic. And I think people over time, even before technology, have found their ways to, in a way that, work with that. So like some people may have like teddy bears or, like in a way have a conversation with like a non-human being
Yeah.
to be able to kind of build that sense of comfort. So I think the need is very clear. The bigger question is, how do you implement this in the right way, which does not drive people crazy, but actually solves that problem, right? So I think to me, it's just how you design that solution. Is that going in the right direction? I don't think right now. I mean, there's definitely like a bunch of smaller AI girlfriend firms that have scaled quite a bit, but I think it's more sort of a dollar-driven outcome. So I think there's probably scope for some intervention there, or some sort of bigger bet on doing this right, either commercially or through some governments, to build it the right way, I feel. If you don't, I think if there's no intervention, then I don't see it going in the right direction. But with the right interventions, it should be able to sort of solve these very critical problems for humanity.
I mean, when we started, we were Stable Diffusion image generator, and Jan was a cloud thing, and like at least 40% of the use case, if not more, was AI, boyfriends or girlfriends. We chose to move very far away from that business, just because I did a user study, and I don't wake up every morning really passionate to solve these problems. But I think a slightly different view to this. I was a policeman for 5 years, right? And you'd be surprised the number of people that call the police just to have someone to talk to.
Wow.
Right? And you'd get on the call, you're just like, dude, like, I got a job to do, and they would just call the police just to have someone to talk to. Right? So, and I think it's going to be a very niche part of the population, right? When you just need to talk to someone, these are really the at-risk part of your population that, really just want somebody to talk to, and then I'd say it's a plus. It's just that I'm not super interested in the business. I see it actually that a lot of AI firms are using it to really battle test and prove their systems. So, as an AI company, you're going to see actually a lot of good stuff come out from Character.ai and all that, because they're the ones with the highest DAU, the highest engagement and all that. It's just that, it's a really tricky place to work in. You are dealing with people with, ideation of suicide, all that. And how do you provide therapy to a population that is going through huge tectonic changes, brought on by economics, brought on by the trade wars, brought on by all of this, right? And, maybe I want to try to create some, discussion. Maybe it's a plus as well. But, of course it comes with a lot of risk.
Yeah, I think one thing I read is that the number one leading cause of death among males below the age of 35 in the US is actually opioid overdoses. And a lot of that may be caused by, as you mentioned, like loneliness, the feeling of, the loss of human connection, right? So perhaps AI could play a role in that therapy or, facilitating human connection.
And I look a lot at games that incorporate AI very, very elegantly to provide that sense of purpose and, entertainment, right? And I feel a lot of humanity is about trying to use our ills to push something good, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff around games in the next 5-6 years.
Super interesting. Next question is, I'm just curious if there's any beliefs that you guys have that are very contrarian, right? Which is maybe beliefs that that you think are true, but are not immediately obvious. Very Peter Thiel kind of esque questions. Yeah.
That one requires some thought.
Yeah, that would quite.
Oh boy. So I'm usually not on these podcasts because I have a lot of contrarian views. And usually it's my wife who is here, so she might kill me for this. I just think a lot of this, I think I spoke up for a few things already. I think we're really overblowing a lot of this. We've probably reached local maxima with LLMs, right? And, I think there's a lot of, the value creation in every industry, there's a lot of value creation now. There's value, capture. I think, LLMs AI is starting to move into the sort of value capture phase. And people are using it not just for financial reasons, but also for, political reasons and all that. When in reality, when you look at a lot of this, it's a next token prediction, right? And here we are, trying to overplay a lot of these things. And if you look at Huawei and a lot of the stuff in factories and all that, I feel a lot of the stuff that we're doing is actually the last generation of stuff, workflow automation.
Yes.
And in Southeast Asia, I sat down with this guy who was like, yeah, AI is going to change agriculture. I was like, if you look at the tractor density in Southeast Asia, it's like extremely poor. I think we should be thinking more about factories and and tractors.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, you're not even using a tractor, right? You're using a wheel or something.
and then
So,
I feel this vast divergence between physics and what is objective and what is practical for like nation building and value creation.
yeah.
And when we come on here, but in reality, a lot of the stuff that we do with this robot, it's actually about the robotic arms, right? Which is a mature technology from the 1960s,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's a lot of hype, and we've got to sort of get down back to the fundamentals and really figure out how to create value, because there's so much money invested. Where's the value creation, right? Where's the GDP increase? Where's everybody's salary? Where's the salary increments for like the everyday man, right? And I think that's sort of why I see a lot of just complete divergence.
Yeah, no, true.
So I'll throw a contrarian view on history.
Yeah.
There's a concept if you study ancient history and not the traditional like mainstream media kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of underground study being done now around the origin of humanity and Anunnaki and all these kinds of things, which are completely contrarian to what you're taught in school, right?
Uh-huh.
And basically, if you studied back that, it will take you all the way back to like the Babylonian Empire and where the basics of accounting and law and these kinds of things came from. And it gives you a very different view of the world, how, there was maybe contrarian technologies to what we have today, spirituality, even the temples in India and everything, the knowledge that is stored within all of those Sanskrit kind of texts and things. There's so much contrarian knowledge and information of where like society came from and where we've evolved from that may have, even if you go so far back, been washed out by the Great Flood, right? There's simply potentially multiple civilizations that have been built upon, and we're just one of those layers.
Interesting. Okay. Ishan.
Podcast is that? What is the name of that?
I'll give you some
Yeah.
plenty of information on it.
Yeah. Maybe another aspect would be like entertainment, where I feel like most general rhetoric is that there's a human element to entertainment, whether that's comedy or movies, which I feel like it's not really necessary, and I think a lot of that, as the technology evolves, would largely be taken over by, like I feel like I feel very peaceful like subscribing to something that's like completely AI generated. I don't think as humans we have an innate need to like seek necessarily something that's created by another human, as long as it kind of feeds our sort of desire of being entertained.
Do you think there's going to be a point, like as Elon Musk proposes, that we're living in a simulation because visual graphics are so good?
Right. I think it's a combination of like what Daniel talked about, like if gaming gets to a certain point, if visual graphics, like VR gets to a certain point, there is definitely a possibility. Like a lot of folks today spend a lot of time on gaming.
Yeah.
Right. They're still interacting to this mostly through this two-dimensional screen and maybe with like headphones on. There will likely be a point where the graphics are so good that we start spending more and more time. I think at what point does it completely tip over? That's sort of I don't know, but the general direction seems to be like going that way. So
Very exciting.
I think the simulation is really just like, I think we are like in a biological simulation. Maybe like, if there was a divine creator or evolution looks a lot like vibe coding. They just sort of throw 10,000 species and like sort of let you evolve. And we could be, as a part of intelligent creator, vibe coding back then in this like biological programming language.
Wow.
And I think that's probably the way that we started, right?
I like the term vibe evolution.
Vibe evolution.
And you throw a multiverse in there, and then you have all different kind of possibilities, right?
Yeah, you just sort of let it, it's like, I look at the way my Gen Z's code now, and I think it's like almost evolutionary. It just doesn't work until all of a sudden it works. You open it up and you're just like, how? I don't know. Like, you're just like,
In some cases, they don't even know.
can we not push this to prod? But they're like, it works, and it actually really well. And I was like, how? Right? And now like agents, you sort of just let it run overnight. They burn up like $100 of cloud credit. It works.
Wow.
And I look at a Tapir and I'm just like, yeah, maybe that's how we ended up with that.
If you think about it, like mathematically is the same, right? It's a probabilistic evolution is a probabilistic function, and like whether vibe coding or like essentially anything generated by AI is a problem listing function. So
Wow.
yeah.
So
not
maybe
too
our
far.
universe was done by like a Gen Z intern. Or, let's see what happens. You get a pure elephant in a human. You're like, all right.
So today we're announcing the creation of a new church. It's called Vibe Church. Yeah. And I want to just wrap up with maybe one last question, which is, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
It's in a deep thought question.
It's not rapid fire. It's a slow burn.
Or it could also just be maybe what's one piece of advice that you would tell yourself when you were 18 or when you were very young as well.
I think my learning, especially when I was young, when I was 16 years old, I had my first business. I was still in high school.
Wow.
I was selling computers and building computers like the ones behind us. I was selling to the teachers in my school and then family businesses and everything like that.
Yeah.
So learning from experience practically, having your own business, be that it may not even be, it could be something online, could be a lab experiment, but having that early ability to try and go out and build something, create something, and you may fail, you may not fail, but if you fail, then you can pick up and go to the next thing. That's something that definitely I think for my children I want to instill in them, is that ability to experiment early and fail fast. I think when I was 7 years old, I was selling lemons from the lemon tree on the front of the yard. It's just that ability to be entrepreneurial and try something.
Just do it. Just try something. Just see what happens, right?
Yes.
I think similar lines like finding your passion and kind of relentlessly following it. So it may be like entrepreneurship, it may be something else, it may be pure technology. I think that's what, in a way, like when I look at myself, that's what's kind of worked for me. Like whether that's computer science, building applications, building computers. I think we probably have very similar backgrounds and early interests that way. So yeah, I think just and making sure you understand like again like the fundamentals, mental models of this world, so that you can build on top of it.
And how do you find your passion?
You just try a lot of things and
Try a lot of things.
you'll see what clicks.
Got it?
Organically.
Organically. Vibe coding. Yeah.
I wish I knew. No, I think one thing that we've been trying with, I think a lot of the younger guys, is really just asking them to keep a journal. 30 minutes a night, put your Gen Z phone down or whatever, and just reflect. I feel that's a very, it's a exercise that is universally applicable, no matter if you're working blue collar, white collar,
Yeah.
and that sort of feedback, continuous learning loop, right? So it's very interesting, right? DeepSeek, all reasoning did to increase the model performance of an LLM is to just put in the think tags.
Yes.
Yeah.
And us, but wait,
Yes.
but wait, right? And I thought that was very poetic, right? If you think about all of the reasoning models, what DeepSeek gave us is really just the key terms, but wait, thinking.
Wow.
It gave you the working out. It's like when you go and you do your math equations and then your teacher asks you, can you please explain how you came to the answer, right? And you do the working out on the side. You understand then how to backtrack and figure out where it went wrong.
Yeah.
And do you think there's something about writing specifically in a journal, or can you do it, let's say, via voice with AI? Like,
I mean, just take 30 minutes, wait and think, right? And one thing maybe just from our research that we're seeing, like if you're in multi-agent formats, putting in sleep actually helps, which is very interesting, which I think evolutionary, whoever's vibe coding us, we're just rediscovering a lot of these things.
Actually, that one of my favorite apps that I use every day is this app called Rosebud.ai. It's essentially like a AI first journaling tool, which I feel like has kind of made me fall in love with journaling all over again.
Man, that's my startup idea.
Like it's really amazing. Like I'm having almost like 20-30 minute conversations with it, like
Interesting.
on most days, where it's just kind of helping me unwrap the things in my head. So would recommend it.
that's great. That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for the time. I know you guys are all really busy, and thank you so much for the time to share your insights, but also maybe some more life philosophy as well. So Daniel, Ishan, and Chris, we'll also put your LinkedIn's or your organizations in the show notes, so people can find you. But thank you so much for joining us, and appreciate you guys coming here.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Take care, and see you guys next episode. Bye-bye.